Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to week 5 of our Faith and Finance series. I can't believe we are already on week 5. This has been a rush. It's been awesome. I've loved being here with you all. As usual today, I am joined by my wife. She's off camera at the moment, but she is working hard on some things on her end. She's also going to be looking through the comments, fielding your questions. If you have questions, and I understand today you're probably going to have more questions than what we've had, if you have questions, please leave them for us in the comments. We want to help you. We want to be here for you. I understand some of this material is going to be a little bit more difficult, but I still want you to follow us today. I'm just going to tell you up front, today's going to feel like drinking from a fire hose. I know I've told you that before, but it's going to feel like that again today because the Lord has laid a lot of content out for us today to go through. Also, gravely important, especially important today, please make sure you've watched these in order. If you are tuning in or if you have missed one, I don't want you to listen to today's message yet. Please go back and rewatch the other ones before you do this one. All of these build on each other, and I want to make sure that you biblically have the principles and the foundation and perspective of God in place before you learn some of these higher concepts. It's really important that you understand the foundations before you build the walls, and I want that to be very clear. Also today, we are going to be doing a drawing at the end of our time together for the winner of the $50. We were going to do a $50 gift card. We decided we'd give you cash instead. Winner of the $50 at the end of today, and we're going to be matching that as well, my wife and I, as a donation to Community Chapel. So it's really been an honor being with you all. With that, we have a lot to get through today, so I want to go ahead and jump right in for today. I'm going to start by reviewing our money ladder, and I'm going to review a little bit of last week before we get into today, because we're going to build on some of those things today. So last week, and in general, we've been discussing this thing called the money ladder. It's really similar to Dave Ramsey's baby steps. But step one, we're going to make sure that we save $1,000 for a starter emergency fund. We talked about last week how this is a protection against small emergencies. The second thing, we're going to list all of our debts, smallest to largest, except our house, and we're going to pay minimums on all those debts, but we're going to attack the little one. Then we're going to attack the next smallest one, and the next smallest one, and so on, paying off our debts using the debt snowball. The third thing we're going to do is we're going to build a fully funded emergency fund of 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. The fourth thing we're going to do is we're going to save up at least 20% as a down payment for a house if you're in that position personally. If you want to buy a house in cash, I'm your biggest cheerleader. I know people that have done it and are doing it. So I'm your biggest cheerleader. You can do it. I will tell you that. If you are going to go that route, I want you to make sure you're also doing step 5 at the same time as saving up for the entirety of that house. Step 5, save up 15 to 20% of your household income. Put that into a retirement account for yourself. This is going to be a 401k or an IRA. More on that in a little bit. And then step 6, pay off your home early. Step 7, live and give generously. So, what did we discuss last week? Last week, we particularly discussed the first 3 steps within our money ladder. We discussed how these first 3 steps exist as a means of getting us out of debt and making us resilient against future debt. We do this because debt is dangerous, and the Lord calls us to get out of that debt. Remember, when it is the Lord's money, it's the Lord's money. We established that in week 2. And when the Lord doesn't like debt, for us to take debt lightly is disobedience. So we also discussed how in society, nearly everyone today is overspending. That debt is normal, but normal is miserable. We also discussed when it comes to debt, we decided we will not be normal, we will be biblical. We're going to follow God's word here. Also last week, we talked about budgeting. We discussed how a budget is your success plan in stewardship. So how does a budget work? You tell your budget what to do, then your budget tells you what to do. So again, last week focused on eliminating debt and making you resilient against debt in the future. And we also discussed how living on a budget is our blueprint for success. So today, I want to transition to a little bit different of a perspective as we look at these last money steps together. Here is an observation you will notice within the Bible when you study how does the Bible lay out your biblical priorities towards money. The first priority that the Bible will give you towards your money is dealing with your internal brokenness and getting your perspective right. Now, we spent our first 3 lessons on this exact thing alone. This is where we begin also to tithe and to budget. The second priority we see biblically is cleaning up our previous messes. This is where we get out of debt and we build resilience against future debt. We discussed that last week. Then the last thing that we do is we build a future legacy. As 1 Timothy 6, 17 through 19 says, storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future. We're going to read that in just a moment. So, biblically, our money principles start with our heart, then our circumstances, and then serving others. And the reason I believe the Lord does it in this order is we have to clean our own mess before we can help others with theirs. Jesus made the statement, he says, don't point out the speck in your brother's eye until you pull the rod out of your own first. When it comes to finances, it is very much the same thing in that biblical priority. We need to clean our mess so that we can be better equipped to serve other people. I'm going to go to 1 Timothy 6, 17 through 19 today. It says, as for the rich of this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God. We've discussed a lot of these things, who richly provides us everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, generous and ready to share. Again, we've talked about a lot of these things, but I want you to listen to this last sentence here because this is going to be our segue into what we're talking about today. Verse 19, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. Today I'm going to talk to you about what it means to live a godly, wealthy life. Godly, wealthy life. What I'm going to begin to do is I'm going to differentiate the difference between godly wealth and money, because these are things that are often used synonymously and they are not the same. The second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about how do we as Christians generate godly wealth. So, something that I want to make very clear, godly wealth and money are not the same thing. And I notice a lot of people within the church today get in this binary trap of either one side that says money is evil and we can only serve Jesus if we have no money, or the other side is give money to this televangelist ministry and the Lord will buy you a Mercedes. Personally, I believe that both of these miss the Bible entirely and what the Lord is trying to say. So let me make this really clear. I'm going to unpack this with you, but this is a really important concept that we understand. Pursuing money without godly principles is evil. However, pursuing godly wealth is good, and I'm going to show you what this actually means. So godly wealth is wonderful, similar to how a godly marriage is wonderful. Now, if you notice how the devil works today, the devil loves to take something that the Lord designed to be beautiful, and he loves to pull stuff out and twist it and build a sinful counterfeit of what the Lord has done. So let me give you a great example of how the devil has done this today. Marriage. So God created marriage to be this beautiful covenant between a man and a woman, and within marriage, sex is something that is beautiful. However, when you separate sex from the context of marriage, sex becomes something sinful. So, sex within marriage is beautiful. Sex outside of marriage is sinful. This is an accurate metaphor for money and godly wealth. Godly wealth means you have God's priorities and you have God's values when it comes to money. So within the scope of God's priorities and values, money is a wonderful tool. However, when money is pursued outside of God's parameters, it becomes something sinful. So, just like sex is a small piece of marriage, money is a small piece of godly wealth. So, sex within marriage is beautiful, just like money within godly wealth is beautiful. However, sex outside of marriage is sinful, just like the pursuit of money outside godly wealth is sinful. So, the money within godly wealth is good. Here is the principle that is working behind the scenes with what we're talking about. The love of money is the way of the world, but serving through money is the way of God's word. Loving money, the love of money is the way of the world, but serving through money is the way of God's word. So what is godly wealth anyways? I'm using this term, but I haven't clearly defined it for you today. Godly wealth is just as misunderstood as poverty. Now, in week 3, we discussed poverty in great detail, and we discussed how poverty is often something that people don't adequately understand. Now, we discussed how most people define poverty as a lack of something material, but in actuality, it's much deeper than that. We discussed how Poverty is not just a lack of food, money, healthcare, water, shelter, clothing. But poverty, we define, is a condition of the soul, not just a material lack. Wealth is the exact same way. Godly wealth is not just material. So, what is our definition of godly wealth? Maybe some of you saw this coming. Godly wealth is a condition of the soul, not just a material abundance. What is godly wealth? Godly wealth is a condition of the soul, not just a material abundance. In week 3, we established that all poverty comes from a place of brokenness. So poverty comes from brokenness, but godly wealth comes from wholeness, and wholeness is found only in Jesus. Let me prove this to you. 2 Corinthians 8:9. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor. Listen to this. By his poverty you might become rich. So that you by his poverty might become rich. When we look at poverty, as we've been defining it, as not just a material lack, but brokenness, we get a much bigger picture of what this verse is saying, right? Jesus didn't die solely for our material lack. Jesus died for our souls. So if we tried to simplify the death of Jesus down to something as simple as money, that would be the ultimate example of undermining. Likewise, since we in this passage cannot boil poverty down to something material, we at the same time have no right to boil down riches to something solely material. We do not become poor because of what we lack. We become poor because of brokenness. And likewise, we are not wealthy because of what we have. We are wealthy because of what Christ did. I want to say that again. This is so important that you understand this. We did not become poor because of what we lack. We became poor because of brokenness. Likewise, you do not become wealthy for what you have. You are wealthy because of what Christ did. Let me prove this to you. In the Bible, we read of Solomon, who was one of the richest and wisest men who have ever walked the earth. And while Solomon began his reign in Israel on a very righteous path, he did not end it the same way. Solomon fell into sin. 1 Kings 11 says that Solomon loved many foreign women, and that these women caused him to turn away from God. And as he grew older, he fell into worshiping foreign gods, particularly the gods of the women that he had surrounded himself with. So when we read Proverbs in the Bible, we know that Solomon was serving the Lord at this time. But when we read Ecclesiastes, which was also written by Solomon, we see him in a much greater backslidden state. We understand that Solomon, according to Proverbs, had devoted his life to learning and growing wise. I wouldn't be surprised if at Solomon's point in history, he was the wisest man to have ever lived. In addition to being wise, Solomon was overwhelmingly rich. It is estimated that in today's figures, if you were to try to quantify the wealth of King Solomon, he would be worth today, listen to this, $2.2 trillion. I said that with a T, trillion dollars. Now, based on the most up-to-date figures I could find, in a 2016 Forbes article, the 560 billionaires that existed in the United States had a net worth just slightly higher than Solomon's. Jeff Bezos, who is the current richest man in the world, his wealth he's Jeff Bezos, if you aren't aware, he's the founder of Amazon. He's worth $200 million. His wealth is only 9% of what King Solomon's was. So, when we read that King Solomon had as many material goods as he could have fathomed, let's look at what he has to say about it. This is Ecclesiastes 2, 4 through 11. So this is after Solomon has fallen away from the Lord. Listen to how he defines this. He says, I tried to find meaning. He's looking for this in himself. I tried to find meaning by building huge homes for myself and by planting beautiful vineyards. I made gardens and parks, filling them with all kinds of fruit trees. I built reservoirs to collect water and to irrigate my flourishing groves. I bought slaves, both men and women, and others were born into my household. I owned large herds and flocks, more than any of the kings who lived in Jerusalem before me. I collected great sums of silver and gold, the treasure of many kings and provinces. I hired wonderful singers, both men and women, and had many beautiful concubines. I had everything man could desire. So I became greater than all who lived in Jerusalem before me. And my wisdom never failed me. Anything I wanted, I would take. I denied myself no pleasure. I found great treasure in hard work, a reward for all my labors. But listen to this last part, verse 11. But as I looked at everything I worked so hard to accomplish, it was all so meaningless. Like chasing the wind. There was nothing really worthwhile anywhere. Listen to the words that Solomon said. Let's look at that just again one more time. He says, I tried to find meaning, and then he goes on to list all of the material possessions he acquired for himself. Solomon had more riches than anyone, but he was not wealthy here. You will never have enough money to buy you godly wealth. Money may come with wealth, but money in itself is not wealth. Jesus is your wealth. You are not wealthy because of what you have. King Solomon was not wealthy. King Solomon was miserable. You are not wealthy because of what you have. You are wealthy because of what Christ did. Christ was broken so you could be mended. Remember, poverty is brokenness. By his poverty might you become rich. Poverty comes from brokenness, but godly wealth comes from wholeness, and wholeness is found only in Jesus. Godly wealth is a condition of the soul, not just material abundance. So what does godly wealth look like today? What does living a godly wealth look like for us? When it comes to living godly wealth, there's two things that we need to understand. Number one is we have to manage God's money towards God's priorities. We have to make sure we're having the Lord's perspective, and we need to have God-honoring behaviors. So godly wealth, we're going to have the Lord's perspective, and we're going to have God-honoring behaviors. So what does it look like to have the Lord's perspective with money? Now, we have actually spent the majority of our month talking about this very thing. We spent particularly the first 3 weeks talking about God's heart towards money. So let's hit some of these principles really concisely right here. I understand this may be a little bit repetitive, but these are critically important before I talk about the last thing that I want to talk about today. So, what is God's perspective on money? Remember, you are a manager, you are not an owner. Psalms 24:1 says this, that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and that we are entrusted with our money. We're not entitled to it. Now, this perspective is a huge protection against the devil. What the devil loves to do is to convince you that the money that you are managing is yours. And if the devil can get you to take ownership of your money, then he can trap you into all kinds of financial sins: greed, arrogance, pride, being undisciplined, being fearful, being discontent. The root of the devil's money traps for us is to begin by getting us to assume ownership of what is not ours. So when we recognize that it's God's, the devil no longer has ground to attack you from. Keep this perspective. You are a manager of money, not an owner. The second thing, always recognize God is your source, period. 2 Corinthians 9:10, He supplies seed to the sower and bread for food. He who does will also supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase your harvest of righteousness. God is the one who supplies for us. Trusting in something over trusting in God is idolatry. So we're going to make sure we don't trust our job, we don't trust our bank account or our investment portfolio. To trust money is to confuse the resource with the source. To trust in money is to confuse the resource with the source. Money is not your source. Deuteronomy 8:18. You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the power to get wealth. You are not your source. Your money is not your source. God is your source. The third thing of a godly perspective is a generous heart. The purpose of wealth is generosity. 2 Corinthians 9:11 says, you will be enriched in every way to be generous in every way. True wealth is measured in what is given away, not what is kept. We need to remember, small giving will always lead to a small life. Proverbs 11:24 says, one gives freely, yet grows all the richer. Another withholds what he should give and only suffers want. The purpose of wealth is generosity. The fourth perspective of godly wealth is we have to be content and grateful. Now, most of us, by default, will gravitate towards pessimism. Contentment requires practice. What does the Word of God say? 1 Timothy 6:6. Godliness with contentment is great wealth. Proverbs 15:16. Better is little with fear of the Lord than great treasure and trouble with it. Ecclesiastes 4:6. Better is one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with striving and chasing after the wind. Contentment can only begin when we replace the desire for what we don't have with the gratitude for what God has already given. I have a very personal story for me that happened with this. Several years ago, I was working a job, and I enjoyed this job. I had a good job. But something for me is I was being worked a lot, and I've been given a whole lot of responsibilities that did not fit under what I was supposed to be doing. And at the time, my boss had talked to me about a raise, and 6 months after that, I began to get a bad attitude towards my job. I began to say all those typical things that we say to ourselves. I work way too hard and get paid way too little. I'm so frustrated, feel like I'm being taken advantage of. All of these typical thoughts that we have for ourselves. And I can remember the Lord began to deal with me saying, Ryan, you need to start showing some gratitude for the things you have in your life. And so what I began to do is every day when I would drive to work on my commute, I began to thank the Lord for things that He had done for me. And maybe it was something little. I can remember one time I fixed the defrosters in my car, and I thanked the Lord. God, I'm thankful today I have defrosters. And maybe it was something small like that to something big, such as my relationship with my wife or the Holy Spirit being with me that day. But I began to show the Lord gratitude. And I can remember there was this transformation of joy that happened within my heart when I began to get this perspective. Well, fast forward about 2 months later. I was sitting at work one day and we got this company-wide email that 2 people had been promoted within our department. And I can remember I wasn't one of those people. My first temptation was to get a really nasty attitude about it. Lord, I was promised this. This was told to me, and I was completely forgotten, and I wanted to get this attitude. So that was a Thursday at work that this happened. The next morning, it came time to do my gratitude time with the Lord. And I can distinctly remember I got in the car and I told the Lord, Lord, I'm going to do my gratitude time, but I want you to know I will not say thank you for my job today. That's off limits, God. I'm not going to tell you thank you for my job. So you can imagine what the Lord wanted me to talk about that day as soon as I said that. I told the Lord I wasn't going to say thank you for that, and He said, you're going to spend the entirety of your time today thanking me for your job. So I reluctantly did what He told me to do in obedience, and I did it. And I thanked the Lord, and I remember I got to work that day, and my heart was completely changed. I was happy for people. I didn't have the bitterness inside, and I went home, normal day. Well, that night, I was sitting around a campfire with some friends from church, and I can remember I was talking to a friend of mine who was talking about a job position that he had opened underneath of him. And as we were talking, he began to ask, he said, are you interested in this? And I said, actually, I am. And he was a friend of mine, so I felt okay being this blunt. But I was like, so what are you going to pay me? And he threw a number out that was $15,000 a year above what my promotion would have been. I can distinctly remember the Lord told me, Ryan, if you wouldn't have got your heart right, I never could have opened this door for you. God had to change my heart before He could ever change my circumstances. Having a godly perspective towards money is to learn to be content and be grateful. So, again, godly wealth requires God's perspective, and the second part is God-honoring behaviors. So, what are God-honoring behaviors with money? Number one is we have to remember to live on a budget. We've discussed this last week. Luke 8:28 through 30 talks about it. We discussed as well, budgets are not a difficulty issue. They are a discipline issue. Discipline leads to excellence, and excellence honors God. I know I just gave you a lot. I want you to follow this with me. Budgets are not a difficulty issue. They are a discipline issue. Discipline leads to excellence, and excellence honors God. We need to honor the Lord with prayerful preparation with His money, because that's ultimately whose money we're managing. Before we spend a dime, we need to make sure we have prayerfully understood God's expectations and desires. Proverbs 14:15 says, "The prudent give thoughts to his steps." The second thing we need to do, God-honoring behaviors, we need to avoid debt. God's word says to get out of debt like your life depends on it. Proverbs 6:1-5 says, "Flee from debt like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter." We're not frolicking through the fields here. We're running for our lives. This is the illustration that we're giving. Proverbs 22:26-27, "Be not one of those who gives pledges, who puts up security for debts. If you have nothing with which to pay, why should your bed be taken out from underneath of you?" Lastly, Romans 13:8, "Owe no man anything but to love one another." So to reiterate, debt is dangerous. And while we're here, I want to make this really clear. Don't ever co-sign for someone else's debt as well. This is just a practical tool, and it's biblical. The CEV translation of the Bible, Proverbs 17:18, "It is stupid to guarantee someone else's loan." That's the translation. That's literally what it says. Proverbs 17:18. So don't co-sign for someone else while we're on the topic of debt. The third thing we need to do as God-honoring behaviors is we need to invest for the future. Now, within our money ladder, step 4 talks about building our home through meaningful preparation. Step 5 talks about investing 15 to 20% of our income towards retirement. I'm going to give you more on that in a moment. But having investments sets you up to be more effective in the future. Listen to this quote from Margaret Thatcher. "No one would have remembered the Good Samaritan if he'd only had good intentions. He had money as well." No one would have remembered the Good Samaritan if he'd only had good intentions. He had money as well. Money sets us up to be more effective in the future. The fourth thing is we need to make sure we are consistent and we are deliberate with our behaviors. Now remember, you are managing God's money as a wise and faithful servant. So, what this means is you understand the Lord's expectations for your money, and importantly, you follow through on them. Listen to what Proverbs says about this. I'm just going to shotgun some scriptures your way. Right here, Proverbs 21:5, "The plans of the diligent shall surely lead to abundance." Proverbs 14:24, "The crown of the wise is their wealth." Look at these words being used. The diligent, the wise. Proverbs 12:27, "The diligent man will get precious wealth." Proverbs 10:4, "The hand of the diligent makes rich." Are you seeing a pattern here? Proverbs 28:20, "A faithful man will abound with blessings." These are just some of the scriptures with Proverbs. If you think I can be repetitive with my money phrases, and don't get me wrong, I really can. I know I do it a lot. But if you think I'm repetitive, you just need to read Proverbs. It's much more repetitive than I. But listen to the heart of these scriptures that I communicated towards you. Diligence requires you live with intentionality. Now, we discussed in week 3, a sluggard is indifferent or ignorant concerning their money. But the diligent is engaged prayerfully and tactically. The diligent is engaged prayerfully and tactically. Another word that is often used in this case is faithful. Faithful requires persistence over a duration of time. So when we are diligent, we live with intentionality. When we are faithful, we have execution. I want you to live with intentionality, and I want you to live with execution concerning money. Now, when we are faithful in executing godly behaviors, one effect is you're likely going to generate more money. So this begs the question, does the Bible even tell us to invest anyways? I'm going to give you some scriptures on this. Proverbs 13:22, "A wise man leaves an inheritance for his children and his children's children." Proverbs 15:6, "In the house of the righteous there is much treasure." Deuteronomy 8:18, "But you shall remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the power to get wealth." Now, I will be honest, I could give you a lot of scriptures that talk about if we should invest, but I would rather spend my time telling you how the Bible says we are supposed to invest. And I hope we can agree that if the Bible didn't want us to invest, then it wouldn't tell us how to do it properly. But there's a tremendous amount of scripture that tells us how we should be going about this. So, biblical investment principles. Here we go. Number 1, wealth is a marathon, not a sprint. Proverbs 13:11, "Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers it little by little will increase it." Proverbs 20:21, "An inheritance gained hastily in the beginning will not be blessed in the end." An inheritance gained hastily in the beginning will not be blessed in the end. So, let me tell you what is not godly wealth, because there's a lot of examples of this today. These are the do-nots with godly wealth. This is not your buddy trying to sign you up for some multi-level marketing thing. He says, hey, I get a commission if I sign you up, and you get a commission if you sign 3 people up. Not godly wealth. In fact, those are called Ponzi schemes, and a lot of them are illegal. Another thing that is not godly wealth is buying a lottery ticket or playing stocks. Remember, get rich quick is not a biblical principle. We're in a marathon, not a sprint. This is not you day trading stocks either. I know almost everybody has that weird uncle or brother-in-law who day trades stocks on the regular. But the fact of the matter is 86% of day traders lose money. This is gambling. It's not investing. This is not you guessing on individual stocks either. I'm going to talk about that here. Now, some of you may be wondering, Ryan, I don't really understand what a stock is. Well, a stock is to own a piece of a company. Now, to own a piece of a company means you are a small owner of that company. So here's the problem. When we try to pick and choose these individual stocks, this is a very effective way for most people to either not make much money or to, in fact, lose money. And the reason is if you're buying a stock, you have to look at it like buying a business. By definition, as a stockholder, you are an owner. So if you bought a business today, you would need to do a lot of research. You would need to know what's on the income statement, the balance sheet, what's its statement of cash flows look like. You need to familiarize yourself with the business, the products that it sells, the leadership. You need to know the culture of the business, the competitors, and what they're doing. This rules out 99% of people buying stock. And I'm particularly telling you this because this is happening so much with what has happened with COVID. There are people buying and selling stocks really quick that are getting into a lot of trouble. I noticed people doing this when the airlines and the hotels and the travel industry in general crashed. People were buying these stocks really quick, trying to make a quick profit. This is not investing. When you're buying companies that are actively failing because in that moment the prices are going up, that is not investing, that's gambling. So we need to remember, wealth is a marathon, not a sprint. Get rich quick is a great way to get in a mess. The second thing is don't put all your eggs in one basket. Your financial advisor might have told you this, but Ecclesiastes told you this first. Ecclesiastes 11:2 says, divide your investments among many places, for you don't know what risk lies ahead. Now, here's how I think we should apply these principles today. And I'm not going to say this is the only way, okay? There's other ways to invest. This is a way that I think works the best for the most people. So again, this is not the only way, and I'm not going to say this is, there's other means to do this. Today I'm going to primarily talk about retirement investing through 401ks and IRAs. Now again, there's other forms of investment I'm not getting into today, but I think this strategy works the best for the most people. So what is a 401k or an IRA? Now we're beginning to talk in IRS tax code here. But a 401k or an IRA is basically a garage you park your money in. A garage, that's how I want you to look at it. Now, your investments are like the car you put inside the garage. Now, when you park your car in a garage, it's better protected, right? The hail, the wind, the rain, the elements, it protects your car. 401ks and IRAs give you this option of protection against taxes. So some of you may be wondering, well, I don't have a 401k. If you work for a not-for-profit, you may have a 403b. Again, it's just tax code. If you're in the military, you will have what is called a TSP, a thrift savings plan. They all function pretty much the same. It's just how the IRS classifies them. But we need to understand taxes will erode your money over time. So legal ways to eliminate taxes means your investments perform significantly better. And in fact, the same investment over a 40-year time period, if you were looking at it within an IRA, will perform 35% better within the IRA, the same investment as it would outside of it. And the reason is taxes eat your money away over time. So again, an IRA or a 401k is the garage that you park your investments in. So a 401k is an investment garage provided to you by an employer. A 403b or a TSP would be the same thing. Now within this, you can contribute up to $19,500 a year. If you're above the age of 50, you have the option to put $26,000 a year into this. I will tell you, if your employer offers a 401k match, I want you to get that match. What a match means is, a lot of them will say it like this: if you put in 3% of your money, we will match you 3% of your money. So basically, you're doubling that first 3% you invest simply by just doing it because your employer is matching that money. This is risk-free, free money to you. I want you to get a match if you have that option. Sometimes you may have to put in 6% to get your employer's 3%, but this is free money. I want you to do this because it's encouraging you to do a behavior you should be doing anyways. So, a second part that I talked about is an IRA. This is another type of garage. It means individual retirement account. And you can set one of these up online. I personally like Fidelity or Vanguard.com. But you can put $6,000 into an IRA or $7,000 into an IRA if you're above the age of 50. Now, with these garages, it's important you realize you cannot take this money out before the age of 59 and a half without penalty. If you, for example, leave your employer and you need to take your 401k, I want you to make sure do not cash out your 401k. You will lose about 40% of it due to taxes and penalties. So if you leave your place of employer, you have two options. You can roll it into an IRA or you can roll it into your next employer's 401k. This is called a rollover. If you leave your place of employment and you have a 401k, talk to your HR rep and talk to your HR rep at your next company to make sure you do not cash this out. So, additionally, I'm giving you an associate's degree in finance within about less than 30 minutes. So I know this is like drinking from a fire hose. I did warn you up front though. Another option that you will get is a Roth or pre-tax 401k. I know this sounds like a different language. I'm going to explain what that means. On a 401k or an IRA, you have a Roth or pre-tax option. Roth means you pay taxes on that money now, but as that money grows, you will never be taxed on it again. Pre-tax means you don't pay taxes on that money now, but when you take it out after the age of 59 and a half, you will pay taxes on that money. Honestly, you're probably asking, I don't know, which one's right for me? This is really a win-win question. You're not going to really go wrong with either of them. But I would say if you're in a higher tax bracket, this is people making over $75,000 a year as a household. If you're in a higher tax bracket, it's probably better to go pre-tax. If you're below that, which most people are, I want you to go Roth. So Roth means you're not paying a lot of, if you're in a lower tax bracket, you're not really paying a lot of taxes now. So if you do pay the taxes now, you're paying them at a really low tax rate, and then your money grows tax-free. So now that we've established what the garage is, so the garage is the 401k or IRA, what kind of car should you put within that garage? I will be honest, this is a bit of a long answer. And by me not teaching you all the nuances, I could actually endanger you. And in a lot of ways, this would be like, if I just said, hey, invest this, it would be like me giving a 16-year-old kid a Ferrari and telling them not to hurt themselves. There's a lot you need to understand before just trying to willy-nilly pick funds within your account. But I'm going to give you some high-level things that I think can help you. Also, in the coming weeks, I'm going to be doing a detailed report around investing. Again, this is a longer topic to really understand this. If you would like that detailed report, message my wife. Her name is Leonette Ferguson. Message her your email, and I will send that to you when I get this, when I finish getting it compiled. If you need detailed help, I'd be glad to sit with you as well and help you. I understand that trying to figure out a 401k or an IRA is really intimidating, but it's one of those things you figure it out once and then you just set it and let it go. It's really easy to do once you get it set up. So remember, the first step is the hardest, and then the steps after that, you won't even notice you're taking them because it's automatic. So high-level things when it comes to investing. When should you invest? The best time to invest was yesterday. The next best time to invest is today. So I want you to make sure that you've reached step 5 on your money ladder before you do this, though. But the best investors who get the best returns and performance do it consistently over time. Every paycheck, they just put a little bit more away, put a little more away every single paycheck. Don't complicate it, just do it. Consistency is king. And you can even set this up to happen automatically. You can do from your 401k with an employer, if your employer offers one, that happens automatically, just automatically comes out of your paycheck. You can set an IRA to where once your money is deposited in your bank account, it pulls that money right back out and invests it for you. So it's like you never really even saw it. The second thing we need to know when it comes to investing is the concept of compounded interest and how powerful this is. So the fact of the matter is, if you invest today, every dollar you invest today is going to be worth about $24 in 40 years. Now, the more time you let money sit, the more it grows. So this happens when your investment generates interest. Chris Hogan says, interest you pay, which is through debt, is a penalty, but interest you earn is a reward. So your investment generates interest. Then that interest generates interest. Then that interest generates interest. And before you know it, you have this wildfire of a money-making machine within your investments. It does take time for this to happen, so you need to understand that it takes the same amount of time to turn $1 into $10 as it does to turn $1 million into $10 million. So time is huge here, and you will grossly underestimate how much you can accomplish long term. You'll probably overestimate what you can do in the short term. But in the long term, it will grow much faster than you could have imagined. So let me give you two actual hypothetical examples. Again, I shouldn't say actual. This is hypothetical, but the math is real. Let's talk about Jack and Jill. You can see I got really creative with my naming here, right? Jack and Jill are two siblings, and Jill is pretty savvy with money. So when she's 20 years old, she invests $10,000 a year for 5 years, and she stops at age 25. So for 5 years, she's invested $50,000. Then she never invests another dime again. Jack, however, he's a late bloomer when it comes to money. He starts investing at 40 years old, and he invests $10,000 a year for 25 years, 5 times as much money as Jill. At the age of 65, they both open their investment accounts. Jack has $731,000. Not bad. That's a good retirement. $731,000 Jack has to his name, and he invested $250,000. So the other nearly $400,000 or $500,000 is pure growth on that money. However, Jill, she started 20 years earlier. Jill has $1.6 million. She invested 1/5 the amount of her brother, but she retired with more than double the amount of money. What made the difference for Jill was compounded interest. Again, she invested 1/5 the amount, but she retired with double the money because it had time to grow. The third thing when it comes to investment success is the rate at which you invest. This is the percentage of your paycheck that you choose to save, that you choose to put into investments. So I recommend 15 to 20% of your income. However, I want you to start where you can. The percentages you invest and the time that you give it are the largest factors that contribute to your investment success. A lot of the times we think we have to pick an investment that performs like a Ferrari, but that's not so. How much you invest is more than 70% of the cause of your success. So if you're younger, I want you to make this 15 to 20% your goal. Even if you can't get there right off the bat, I want you to make it your goal over time. Remember, start where you can. I want you to look at this investment like it's a tax. Now, if the government knocked on your door and they said, hey, we're going to put an extra 15% tax on you and you have to pay it, most of us would kick and scream. We'd be really upset, but we would figure out a way to pay that money because we had to. Look at this like your freedom tax. Theodore Johnson was somebody, he worked for USPS in the early 1900s, and he never made more than $14,000 a year. However, throughout the course of his career, he saved 20% of his income. And when he died with $80 million. Never made more than $14,000 a year. He paid his freedom tax. I can tell you, do this the best you can. It's worth it. Number 4, when it comes to investment principles here, the stock market is full of ups and downs. You need to realize that if you invest in a 401k or IRA, you're going to see your balance bounce around quite a bit. This is normal because the stock market bounces around quite a bit. It's okay. It's normal. Even if you see a crash, trust me, I've been through some of them and they hurt. They sting. A crash means you'll look and you'll see, wow, 30% of my money seems to be gone. It's not gone. It will come back. It always has. Today, the stock market is breaking new highs. On Friday, the stock market closed higher than it ever has within the S&P 500 and NASDAQ. I'll talk about that more in a moment. But the stock market closed higher than it ever has. 5 months ago, however, the stock market was crashing faster than it was in the Great Depression. Here's the principle. Dave Ramsey has this statement. He says, the only people that get hurt on a roller coaster are those that jump off. When the market goes down, do not sell. Do not get rid of your investments when the market is down. I want you to hold on, and I want you to ride the roller coaster. Realize the news media is going to be trying to sell panic when this happens. There's a phrase in journalism that says, remember, if it bleeds, it reads. So they will often exaggerate for the purpose of getting more views. Also remember, these are journalists, they're not economists. And even some of the economists that they will bring on are very insincere with how they go about it. So leave your money alone, and it will be okay. Even if this would have happened in the Great Depression, you would have eventually been okay. Just leave the money alone, don't sell it. The fifth thing, this is a huge one as well. Don't try to time the market. Now, what do I mean by that? This is a huge one. There's this saying in investing that says, buy low, sell high. And while this is true in theory, with the stock market, it's impossible to actually put into practice. Experts today have no idea where the lowest of the lows are, and they have no idea where the highest of the highs are. And every time I hear them talk about it, they're always wrong. Fidelity, who is the world's largest investment firm, they surveyed all the accounts that they have. They have trillions under management. Fidelity surveyed the accounts. They found that the highest performing accounts that they had belonged to dead people. In other words, people weren't messing with the money. They just left it alone and left it invested. The highest performing accounts belonged to dead people. The second highest performing accounts belonged to people who forgot they had the money invested there. And then the lowest performing accounts belonged to regular people who were trying to time the market. They were trying to buy low and sell high. So, what's the secret to winning? Buy and leave it alone. Don't try to mess with it. Just buy every paycheck. Remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Just keep investing and you will be great. For most people, investing in an S&P 500 index fund is going to probably be your best option on investing. Now, the S&P 500 is a collection of the 500 biggest stocks in the United States. So, if you've heard of companies like Apple or Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook, Netflix, Google, Home Depot, J.B. Hunt, really big companies, they're all part of the S&P 500. Now, about this fund, Warren Buffett, who is the most successful investor who's really ever lived, he said when he dies, he wants all of his money to go into an S&P 500 fund and a little bit in government bonds. But the richest man in the world says he thinks this is the best investment after he dies. And so for most people, that's the best investment for them as well. It long-term has outperformed mutual funds, 96% of them, of mutual funds. Now, a mutual fund is a collection of stocks that is governed by a professional. So you hire a professional who thinks they have the winning formula when it comes to stocks. And although these may look good in the short term, long term, an index fund outperforms mutual funds. 96% of the time, an index fund will outperform mutual funds. The 4% of mutual funds that beat an index fund, they die and they will change out year after year. So it's not consistent, that next 4%. And this is because it's nearly impossible to predict what the world is going to do. You have no idea when a trade war with China is going to crash some companies. You have no idea what wars could happen or what new innovative idea is brewing within another company. Now, if we went back to 2010, you would probably struggle to pick whether Snapchat or Vine was going to be the next social media platform. Now, we all know now Vine went out of business, but Snapchat did rather well. So again, I would need more time to explain this in detail, but remember, it's just easier to buy an S&P 500 index and just ride the roller coaster. For most people, that's going to be the best option. I would say if you're within 10 years of retirement, though, you need to add bonds to your portfolio. Bonds are loans to a company. So when you add bonds, it will make the ride a lot smoother. I don't want you to have any big drops in the roller coaster right before you retire. So if you're within 10 years of retirement, again, this is not perfect for everybody. This is just very generalized advice. I would say if you're within 10 years of retirement, about half S&P 500 index, half total bond market would be a really good investment for most people. Most 401ks have these options and every IRA does. So these should be available to most people. If available to you, consider investing in a Vanguard target date fund. Now, what is a target date fund? It is a collection of these index funds, and it gets more conservative as you get older. So essentially, if you said, I want to retire in the year 2035, as you approach that year 2035, that fund is going to get more conservative for you. So that's a really good option for a lot of people. And the reason this is a good option is when we're younger, we want to be more aggressive with our investments because we have time to ride the roller coaster. Time makes that volatility a lot easier for us. When you're older, you don't want that roller coaster to bottom out on you. I will say when COVID hit, my wife and I's investment portfolio took a 30% drop really quick. However, we knew that the stock market always comes back, it always has. So we just invested more money when that happened. We invested, we kept invested, we didn't change anything. Even when the news was saying, this is worse than the Great Depression, it's all going to zero, everybody panic, we knew we're just gonna ride the roller coaster. Now, afterwards, here we are now, we have much more money than we did before COVID because it did come back. The next one, I know I'm giving you a lot of advice. Again, I'm cramming an associate's degree into just a little bit of time. I want you to make sure you look in that you are invested into index funds. Almost every 401k, again, has them available. IRAs definitely do, but index funds are basically massive collections of stocks. I like the S&P 500, it's the 500 biggest ones. If you want to add some real estate in your portfolio, you can do a real estate investment trust fund. It's called a REIT index. This is a collection of companies that own real estate. Basically, you're buying hundreds of investments within one fund. Because remember, we don't want to invest in just one thing. We're dividing our money across multiple things, as Ecclesiastes said. Now, I did not say mutual fund. I said index funds. Index funds have outperformed 96% of mutual funds. The other 4% that happen to beat an index change year after year, so there's no consistency within those. And you will notice if you click within index funds, they have the line that says past performance is not indicative of future returns. If you want to learn more on this, a great book on investing is called The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. It has a lot about how the stock market works. Another great book is Money Master the Game by Tony Robbins. It has a lot on this. Personally, I like this S&P 500 index or total stock market index for most people. So going on with this, the last thing I'm going to tell you about investing, I know you're like, Ryan, I feel like I'm drinking from a fire hose here. Again, I'm aware, I just want to make sure you understand this. Make sure your financial advisor is what is called a fiduciary. Now, that's a weird word. Let me tell you what it means. This is a massive deal. Fiduciary means they legally have to put your best interest first. They legally have to put your best interest first. You need to understand that many financial advisors will misuse your money because they are using it to line their own pockets. A fiduciary means they legally have to put you first. So, in my opinion, most of this should be illegal, how this works. But let me give you an example. Let's say you go to the doctor, and the doctor knowingly prescribes you a bad medicine because that medicine puts more money in that doctor's pocket. Now, this would be illegal. This is malpractice. So with this, we would not go to this doctor. Now, in the world of medicine, this is illegal, but in the world of finance, this is normal, as horrible as it is. If your advisor is not a fiduciary, get another advisor. This means that oftentimes they will put you in they'll put you in investments that underperform, but it pays them better. They will create unnecessary trading fees that generate more money for them. They will charge you commissions every single year as an advisor. I don't care if they're your nephew. I don't care if they're your brother-in-law. If your advisor is not a fiduciary, get another advisor. The difference, statistically speaking, is over 56% of your money over the course of your life that you lose by a bad advisor. 56%. So, the difference in what this cost you, the reason this is there are these little things in investments called fees. The average fee that people pay is 3.17%. So there's like 11 different types of fees that you can get charged, and I don't even understand how a lot of them work. I just know that I hate them. But fees, they charge, on average, the average person pays 3.17% a year. Now remember, the S&P 500, you're paying so minimal of a fee on that, and it outperforms 96% of these guys. So let's just hypothetically say really quick, I know I'm getting a little tighter on time, but let's hypothetically say that you have an advisor that matches that 96th percentile, but you still have to pay that 3.17% in fee. Now that 3.17% in fee means that it kills your compounded interest. So instead of getting, say, an 8 or 9% return, you're now getting a 5% return after all those fees are paid. This is 2/3 of your money over 40 years. 2/3 of your money. If your financial advisor is not a fiduciary, get a new advisor. Again, an index fund will outperform even fiduciaries usually, but if you do need an advisor, I recommend you ask them if they are fiduciary. If they can't just clearly say yes or no, the answer is no. They might say, well, technically, if they give you any of that, the answer is no. They need to be a fiduciary. So, recap. Wow, we have talked about so much today. We have talked about what it means to live a godly, wealthy life. We talked about godly wealth and money and how to generate godly wealth. Now remember, godly wealth is a condition of the soul. It's not just material abundance, and this is the most important. We don't become poor because of what we lack. We become poor through brokenness, and poverty comes from brokenness. But godly wealth comes from wholeness, and wholeness is found only in Jesus. Remember, we are not wealthy because of what we have. We are wealthy because of what Christ did. Also, when it comes to our investments, quick recap here too. We need to invest consistently over time. We're not trying to be fancy. We're just investing into index funds. We know that the more time we let our investments grow, the better they do because of compounded interest. So we want to invest early and as often as we can. We know that these index funds in a tax-advantaged account, remember this is your garage, like an IRA or 401k, are the best option. They perform the best and are the most diversified. So remember, Ecclesiastes says don't put all your eggs in one basket. So with an S&P 500 index, we get 500 of the most powerful companies in the world. Plus, in a 401k or an IRA, we get the advantage of not paying so much in taxes. That will make them perform 35% better. Remember also, don't time the market. If it drops suddenly, don't panic. It's okay. Now, remember, the only people that get hurt on a roller coaster are those that jump off. Remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So we will invest consistently and faithfully. Remember, no one would have remembered the Good Samaritan if he only had good intentions. He had money as well. Money helps you to be more effective, but we have to make sure our money falls within the parameters of godly wealth. And that's what I want for you. I want you to change the world with godly wealth. Remember, every step of the way, this is the last thing, pray and be led by the Spirit of God in all areas of your money. Remember, it's God's money. Follow His priorities and principles. So thank you all so much again. It's been an honor to be with you all this month. Also, now is the time we're going to do our drawing. So my wonderful wife has taken the names of everybody who has participated. And Lee, you have much prettier hands than me. Why don't you draw one for us?
Okay, let's see. Who is it? Kara Utzler.
Kara Utzler. All right. Kara, you get a $50 reward. So we will get that to you today. It's been an honor. If you have any questions, reach out to us. Feel free to shoot us a direct message. Was there anything in the comments that we had today? Or no questions today. Okay, if you have any questions, I know this was a lot. I wanted to cover as much as I could. I know you probably still feel a little overwhelmed with it. If you have questions, give us a call, reach out to us. I'd be glad to sit with you and help you. Again, I want to help you to understand this the best that you can so you can pray and make the right decisions for you and your family. Go change the world. It's been an honor. We will see you all later.